everyone, thanks a lot for being in this session, and I apologize if logistics wouldn't allow me to attend all your sessions as much as I really love to be there. The good news is that after a year of migration processes, I finally received my Swedish residency card yesterday. So I'll be able to arrange a flight back to Gothenburg right after my session now. So I'm also very thankful for the team who's organizing this research day to allow me to do my presentation via Zoom. Our moderators Niklas and Giovanna discussed that the reason for me not being able to present in person is especially relevant to the context of the strand politics practices and publics, which can be valuable reminder of how borders are. And with that, I'd like to segue to secrets to approach what I'm going to talk about this morning. Well, I've worked with borders for a long time, and while the theme of secrets has always been lurking from the periphery of my works, I bring it to the fore now. Both borders and secrets plays crucial roles in shaping identities, I think, personal and national. Both are also a source of power. Nation-states exercise power through border control and state secrets. Individuals play with power through hiding and revealing similar boundaries. Now, Secrets is the title of one of my twin solo exhibitions in Melbourne. I say one of the twins because it's held in parallel with another solo show in Jakarta called Disclosures. Both exhibitions are still running at the moment, and they show very similar works or works in a series. One of the works in the exhibition is a 38-minute film that's telematically connected between the two screening spaces in Jakarta and Melbourne. But this morning, I'll focus on Absence in Substantia. I'm very happy that I could show these works, Absence in Substantia Density and Absence in Substantia Frequency, to some of our textile students just before these works were shipped to the two exhibitions last November. The works were really made in Gothenburg with the support of so many here at HDK-Valand. You know who you are, and my gratitude always goes to you all. I will assume that everyone here at least knew that the mass killings happened in Indonesia starting in 1965. If anyone isn't familiar with it, we'll discuss it later in the discussion. Well, the massacres happened quite a long time ago now, almost 60 years ago. And people say time heals. But healing isn't the only thing that comes with time. Forgetting also comes with time. And another thing that comes with time is declassification. Declassification is a process of removing a classification status from documents to state secrets. This process is regulated differently by different governments, but there are common practices. For example, countries like the United Kingdom and Brazil set a default time of 50 years for potential declassification. I said potential declassification, and I'll return to potential declassification later. The support, or at least abetting, from the US government in the Indonesian massacres has been a subject of debate for quite long, at least for 2 decades now. The most recent push was quite significant in 2018 when the National Security Archives at the George Washington University, which is a non-governmental organization, declassified more than 35,000 pages of documents. The archive is available from the US National Archives website, NARA, and you can see how it looks like there. That QR code will bring you to the website. Anyway, so Absence in Substantia developed through analysis of data within this particular declassified archive, which I came to call the Protocols of Killings Archive, following the title of the project. The Protocols of Killings Archive contains the cables, wired communications that used to be top secret or classified that passed through the US Embassy in Jakarta between the years 1964 and 1968. It's a wide-ranging record of communications during the critical period surrounding the 1965-66 Indonesian mass killings. The overall aim of the project is to uncover and aesthetically publicize patterns of group dynamics across the archive's 35,000 page as a whole. So this is a thick, large archive, a large corpus, and finding patterns in it requires computational methods. So I have a digitized copy that I work with, which I obtained from historian Brett Simpson, the leader of the Indonesian project at the National Security Archives at George Washington University. So since 2021, I've been trying to work with the archive in several different ways. To be able to process content and to work with computational method, the first thing I had to do is to try extracting the PDF into text that is readable by computers, right? So at the end of 2021, I had a group exhibition where my contribution would be from this project, but I was nowhere then in terms of analyzing the contents. So I tried to familiarize myself with the archive through another way, which I can say was through the forms and through technology. So this became a video and sound installation reflecting on the continuity of technology, in which you can also see what the content of the archives look like.
May 5th, 1966. The 9 of them slept in what used to be their living room.
So you saw that there, and these are what the telegrams look like. They're not so bad. I mean, they do look old, but they're quite readable, at least by human eyes. They are readable. The problem started when I started extracting the text. This one is great. There are only few parts unreadable by the computer. And when I say unreadable, what I mean is that the computer can't extract them. For example, this handwritten part specifically was read as a series of dots and underlines. But to be fair, our human eyes also can't read them. And this one, for example, is also not so bad at all. There are excess spaces for some reasons. But when I have to analyze them, I can ask the computer to skip the spaces, so that's okay. And this one, almost no error at all. The computer even marks the words that it thinks may have been misspelled, like subject and embassy. But otherwise, the only part that was not entirely extractable was the handwritten part, this part, ND 67289, and it becomes unintelligible. Now this one is a problem, and I found many like this. It's relatively easy for our human eyes to read. Following immediately discussion with Indonesian Konjen, reported MTEL 187, Sujoko said, and so on. But the computer is somehow confused. There are quite a lot of faults, and they seem to be irregular faults, because some, like these words, are intelligible while the others aren't at all. So for a long time I tried to figure this out. I consulted our university's research infrastructure for digital humanities, or GRIF, and they suggested going to our university's digitization specialist. So I did, and the OCR specialist there, ran the archive through their OCR service several times, which sometimes improved the extraction, but the results were still irregular. This took me quite a few weeks to figure out, looking at samples and thinking really hard what it was that caused this irregularity. Until at one point I stopped focusing on the unintelligible files and started focusing on the ones that were almost perfect. I looked at these documents and found that they were different kinds of documents. They looked like they were computer printed, really. I mean, computer printed in the 1960s? Maybe not. Well, they do have a different form. They're not telegrams, right? Instead, they're titled withdrawal notice. And most of them says that they're withdrawn in 2005. And I found that, for example, most of these documents say they were withdrawn in 2017. I was struck by this finding because, firstly, what were these computer printed documents doing in an archive from 1964 to 1968? And secondly, I was excited to understand that these documents are perfect examples of how the materiality traces of technologies can extend beyond digitization. So let me show you the materiality of the technology here. This is what the teleprinter technology looks like since the 1920s. They were machines that automatically transcribed Morse codes to typewriters. So, certain documents within the archive were harder to extract because of their technological material origins. When they were typewritten, it means that they were prone to the ink ribbon being excessive, and that could cause the typewritten letters to smudge. But documents that were computer printed in 2005 and 2017 have a uniform typography. But what are these documents? What are these withdrawal notices? Well, earlier when I talked about the process of declassification, I described it as potential declassification. This is because just before declassification, officials would go through documents that were classified as state secrets to determine which ones can be safely declassified. And this is why political sociologist William Walters discusses public inquiry for declassification as a transaction. Walters calls this the regime of disclosure, because although it is true that public inquiries for declassification are a fight for disclosure, they simultaneously generate further closures. So in a way, public inquiry is not an ultimate opposition to state secrecy that many believe it to be. Walter's regime of disclosure is a way forward to think about declassification materially, and I extend on this in absence in Substantia. When I look closer, the reason for the removal of the documents was described. Here it says that the item was removed because access to it is restricted. And this is interesting because when we think of the works of Jenny Holzer, for example, what I visually understood so far about regimes of disclosures was these blackouts. But in the Protocols of Killings archive, you can't see these blackouts. These withdrawal notices serve as placeholders for whole documents. To describe it a bit differently, in the Protocols of Killings archive, instead of blackouts, whole documents were withdrawn, whole documents were retracted. So many of the documents specify the reason for withholding, so I looked for it. It says section 3.3b of EO 13526. And these are the reasons listed under section 3.3b of EO 13526. Confidentiality of a human or non-human intelligence source, danger of mass destruction, serious impairments, war plans that remain in effect, harm, international agreement, So whereas automatic declassification should have happened at 25 years, when officials combed through the archive in preparation for declassification in 2017, which is at more than 50 years after the event, they decided that these documents still could not be declassified. Wow. So these are the crème de la crème of secrets. This is where I extend on Walter's regimes of disclosure. Yes, the secrets are kept secret as part of the regimes of disclosure. I focus on this disclosure generated closure as potential and referred it. So when I searched the 35,000 page archive, I found that 798 documents were withdrawn. On each of the documents, we can see that they have the same headings and subheadings. I focused on the dates. These are the dates of the original documents that were retracted. So I asked the computer to list the dates of original documents that were the crème de la crème of secrets. I used a statistical software called R and asked it to do a density and frequency graph showing the density and frequency over time. And this is what they came out with. The red line is on the 1st of October 1965, which is when the killings started. And this is the frequency of the crème de la crème of the US state secret, which is peaking just before the red line and tapers down afterwards. It looks like they knew that was going to happen. Now, the involvement of the US government in the Indonesian mass killings have been debated for at least 2 decades. What do these graphs say though? We don't even know what the documents that were withdrawn would say, right? What can we do with secrets that are kept secret even when everything else is declassified? Now, I'd like to bring in my personal experiences of liminal death, the state of the dead, no dead of my grandfather, who was disappeared forcefully in 1965 as part of the mass killings, which I will try to describe now through political scientist Oliver Kearns' work on the absence left by drone strikes. Kearns argues that a political response to covert strikes must go beyond filling in absences and address how absence gains meaning in implicit ways, and that secrecy and absence are not epistemological barriers. They materialize covert strikes and the spaces they leave behind, and shape subject positions that recognize the absence of casualties within those spaces, and doubts and suspicions alluded to by that absence. I understand this very intimately. Without the absence left by my grandfather's disappearance, my identity would never be whole. So there is a whole that fully considers the absence left by violence, and it is an absence in substantia. Now, psychologist Paul J. Sylvia, who is like me, also a proponent of neuroaesthetics, talks about the process of understanding something as an aesthetic emotion. These processes were so emotional for me, and as someone who is supposedly trained in doing aesthetics, this is what I'd like to share with the public. I started thinking of an aesthetic strategy of iconization. Many of us so-called leftist academics shy away from objects and iconization, but I really like what Jeffrey Alexander says about icon. And I'll share this with you. Iconicity critiques conventional understanding of capitalist commodification. Social theory has either disregarded or stigmatized the metaphorical and emotional power of economic objects. Contemporary thinkers have become blind to powerful processes of iconicity or stigmatized them within Marxist cultural critique. The fact is, Objects and icons continue to be powerful whether we like it or not. So that's why I made this. And I'll stop right there, a point which is hopefully enough of a cliffhanger. We can discuss further later.